Welcome to Horticulture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture. Hey everybody, I'm gonna start this episode right on topic and tell you how I found half of a possum this morning outside.
Oh, this should be good.
Yeah, actually,
Which, to be clear, it was the front half that you found.
It was ribs up to head and nothing internal.
That would be the harder part to eat, in my opinion.
Yeah. It was sad because I don't hate possums. I know some people are really creeped out on it, but all I saw, it kind of caught me off guard as half a possum would. I walked over and I saw these little paws upward, and I was like, "The hell!" And
buddy,
yeah. And then I was like, "Oh, I wonder if this is the possum that we thought was friends with the cats, but apparently not no mo."
Out.
Yeah, we every once in a while come in the morning. If I come in early while it's still dark, and it'll be around the cat food bowls, right? Looking for, scraps.
Sure.
And I thought, why aren't the cats getting this thing out of here? What are they doing? Well, apparently they have done did it.
The cats and coyotes have formed an alliance.
I found a bunch of babies the other day in a bucket, and only
Baby
one was.
Wait, to be clear, baby what?
Baby possums. There are no baby humans at the Sheffield.
I wasn't
residence.
thinking. I didn't know babies. You were talking about cats. Talking about
buckets of babies.
I was moving buckets to wash buckets the other day, and there were. I was like, something smells real bad. I thought it was a weird stinky bucket because that happens a lot. And for floral buckets, they get weird. But so I'm moving buckets, and I go to grab this big yellow bucket, and I'm like, there's movement in there, and and I look down in it, and there's a baby possum that looked fine and alive, and then there's two dead baby possums, and I don't know how long they've been
starting
dead.
on such a dark note here.
Yeah,
I love possums.
I know the flower farm, and it's possum destruction.
I like possums.
There will be flowers for the funeral, at least. That's the good news.
But I set the other one free, and we're cool, we're chill.
Oh, I'm not saying that you did anything messed up. I'm just
sorry.
The old madness
it's having on me.
Would you rather me tell you about the black vultures that are stalking me, or
you're the possum?
They can sense you're burning out.
To be clear, has anyone else seen the vultures, Alexis?
Or is it just you?
Yeah, just like the black dog of the highway.
Are the vultures in the room with us now?
Photographs. Yeah. So they've been. I like raptors and birds, and they're cool, but these ones have been being a little creepy. But I think I believe the young ones. So we have an old tobacco stripping shed in the back that's fallen down, and since we've lived there a few years, there's black vultures that nest in there, and so we'll see the fuzzy, ugly babies that run around. And so there's been one or two that have been around lately, and they'll just sit on the fence near me in the fields and just watch, and then the dogs see them and they freak out, and but it was they don't leave, they just watch me, and I'm like, hey.
Well, there's two things they could be communicating, right? One is they expect you to keel over.
Yeah,
death,
true.
Which I'm probably but there's also the one that you're a primate and a predator, and they think maybe you're gonna kill something, and leave it behind.
I'm wondering. I don't, or maybe they've just been waiting on the cats to feed them possums. I don't know.
It depends on the proportion of time you've spent in doing battle cries in the field versus laying on the ground whimpering. They're
it's those audio cues that are very important.
Maybe they're finding these dead possums in your wake, and they're like, oh, later.
Is she ailing or is she an alpha? We don't know.
The corgis are not pleased, and they are much bigger than the corgis, so that's been an interesting. I'm like, please don't terrorize the large birds. Thanks. So they sit up on the telephone poles and stare down at me, and I'm like, hey guys.
I feel like there's a case study in wildlife management and on your place. I just feel
it sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, these are fringe case scenarios that I'm not prepared to discuss.
Well,
I'm just saying.
When I said it was on topic today, it's because for you, listener, we're talking about managing wildlife in your gardens or your fields. We had a request for that, so thank you for asking. And then it just seemed really timely because I stumbled across half of a dead possum this morning. So
yeah,
so we're differentiating from like insects and.
Right.
It's sort of, I guess, mostly mammals in our neck of the woods.
Vertebrates,
sounds like
maybe?
birds.
Vertebrates.
Yeah, there we go.
Hooray.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that warm themselves, or no? Sorry.
I don't know. We've covered marsupials already too. So hey, let's get specific.
Good eye, there, little possum.
I mean, if we include the insect pest, we could have our own 10-part series on that because
we're focusing on stuff that has a backbone.
Yeah,
yes.
We'll leave the insects to Dr. Larson and his arthropod podcast. So
yes,
good stuff.
Well, the half consumed or half of a possum one leads me to believe that you have other animals on the property, like possibly. I was wondering if you had issues with like kind of wild dogs or coy dogs or any of those kind of like canines romping around besides your two corgis.
Yeah. We do have some coyotes around. I've never seen them on the property, but they've at least sounded pretty close, close enough that the dogs get a little freaked out. Yeah.
And do you guys have like woodland tracts, or I guess I should use the term corridor here, wildlife corridor? You have any of those around your farm? I mean, a lot of times people that mention that they have those, they have a greater possibility of having wildlife damage.
Yeah, there's a lot of deer. We do have a lot of deer in the area, and knock on wood, hope even though I've found footprints I just found some footprints in my cover crop little area, but they've not really seemed to bother stuff. I don't know if it's just because they're really passing through.
They're not munching down.
They don't
on
feel
cover
safe.
crops.
Yeah, I don't know if they feel safe right there out in the open. But there's a big alfalfa field farm across the street from me, and they in the mornings I'll see them going.
Well, you have that pond out there, which I would think functions as kind of like a Buc-ee's or whatever.
Yeah. There's there's babies. We have to be careful certain times of year because there's babies that bed down, and we'll find them around.
Baby deer.
Baby deer.
Baby deer. Buckets of
baby deer, baby vulture, baby possum. We talked about it all.
Baby sharks.
Sorry. Alligator turtles.
Oh.
Close.
Alligator snapping little snappers. Oh my god!
So I can't have ducks.
It's like Baby Bowser.
Yeah,
Mario.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, that's why I can't have ducks.
You have like Wild Kingdom out on your farm. It sounds like, Alexis.
For someone who really doesn't have any woods, it is kind of weird. But
you have a little fragment with the pond. It seems like it's like the spot.
Yeah. The water.
Like that's where I would hang out.
You'll have, I'm guessing, like trail cams and stuff. Have you ever set them up like on the pond, on and around the pond, just to see what the deal is?
We have some minks out there. The cats have brought us some minks. Again, why I can't have ducks. So we know that there's minks down there. Actually, Tyler was like duck hunting off the pond, or like for geese, I guess. But and he said he was sitting there, and he's whatever, and something crawled over his foot and like kind of freaked him out, and he looks down, it's a mink, and then like he freaked out and the mink freaked out, and like it was whole
that's some good camouflage.
So
good camouflage clothing.
Yeah, I was like, you were asleep, weren't you? That's why it felt comfortable.
It's like 3 a.m. He's in a ghillie suit, been unconscious for 90 minutes.
Pretty much. But yeah, so I mean, voles and moles, I know I get a lot of calls on those, and I would say if I've had so far in my farming experience, and I'm not growing vegetables, so I don't think I have quite the pressure that they're not quite as interested in.
And those things are
flowers.
different, voles and moles, right? You might want to,
yeah, voles, they're very similar, but voles are more like a field mouse that doesn't have a tail. So that's,
and they don't have the same burrows as moles do they? The voles do not.
I don't know. I don't think so. They're like right on the surface.
Right on top of they're right on top of the. Usually when I get phone calls of people that, regarding voles, it's number one been winter with a lot of snow, because they'll get under there and they can have like multiple litters of babies per year. And when they're protected under snow, it's going to be bad years for voles if you have them in the area because they're protected. But the other, if you have large clumps of like field grass, they can get under there and
Mm.
burrow as much as they want through the grass, right on top of, and they're very distinct, right on top of through the sod scruff. But if you have a lot of protected areas where like owls and hawks and natural predators can't get to them, that's almost always the case when I go out and do an assessment. It's
Mm.
where you have some of these situations where there's a lot of cover. Then you
Mhm.
Yeah.
have vole problems.
I
Vole with a V,
see I
VOLE.
see vole problems in people who are using a plasticulture system of some kind,
Mm,
so
yeah.
landscape fabric that they're not removing every year. So, if, large blueberry, production, or like I use it in my fields, or laying down tarps. So a lot of people kill off. We've talked about it before. Cover crops with silage tarps or things like that, and they'll be under there. So when you pull those back and you see these little indent tunnels, they're not all the way
Mhm.
underground. Those are vole tracks, and I have a corgi who will eat those voles as you pull the tarp back. So,
Voles are one of the
Nice.
things for commercial orchards that sends a chill
Yeah.
up.
mhm.
The
Yeah.
commercial
Fruit
orchards.
trees. Yeah.
Yeah, for fruit trees, because voles, their diet is more like bulbs and plant matter itself,
Hmm.
whereas a mole is more grubs and earthworms, things like that. So a lot of times we say mole and vole, but they're completely different. What they eat is completely different, and their
Hmm.
tunnels, everything is different about those. But what orchards have found out, their golden solution to that is they just have gravel pads many times around the
Mhm.
young trees, and that makes an area that the vole has to cross, and that
Yeah,
allows
right.
predators to
Mm.
do the work. And it's amazing. I remember the first time I ever said, well, what's all the gravel around everything for? There was a couple different reasons, but the one I keyed in on was that it's areas that voles absolutely do not like to cross, and if they don't like to cross it, you can keep them away from your young trees, and they'll tend to girdle young fruit
Hmm.
trees, and then the tree just dies wherever it's girdled at. But
Right.
I thought that was interesting. That was a very low impact sort of habitat modification. We talk a lot about habitat modification, but that was just a simple thing that they did, and no more vole problems. So it's
My
I
interesting.
was
favorite thing. Go ahead, Brett.
I was sitting on my patio this morning, back patio. We have a lot of natural habitat in our backyard for all kinds of things. And I was just sitting there and I saw this vole pop out onto the edge of the patio, and it's running along, sneaking kind of along the edge of stuff, trying to get from one section to another. And then it just runs directly into my foot. And then it starts
I don't.
squealing, going crazy, takes off. Like, what did you? And I was like, you ran into me. I don't know what you want me to do here. But
He's
yeah,
like, "Watch where you're going, buddy."
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
whoa. I
I don't
think you
think this
dented my
suits
shoe.
Rude.
real well. Yeah,
It's
that's funny.
well, it's almost like, and this is not exactly perfect, but like it's almost like if you put it on a spectrum, and on the one end of the spectrum was the like a traditional kind of field gray little field mouse, and
Hmm.
the other end of the spectrum is a mole. It kind of looks like you almost averaged the two to some extent. There's certain attributes of a
Hmm.
vole that
Yes.
from each of those, and
Hmm.
Yeah.
yeah, they're weird looking little guys.
Terrors,
Yeah, but
potential
they see a
problems.
little better than a mole, but not as well
Yeah.
as a mouse or
Yeah.
me,
So if
apparently.
you see these tracks right along through sod, that's right on top of they kind of just move stuff around and make tunnels right at the surface level,
Hmm.
and you can see they're not really tunnels; they're just kind of pushing through the
Mhm.
sod. And that's one
Hmm.
of those things you can't really. I guess you technically could fence them out, but we don't fence for voles. Instead, what because specifically commercial producers do. If they have plasticulture operations, even beyond orchards, is that they try to the ones I've worked with, we try to talk a lot about modifying the corridors around, keeping everything mowed really close if you have a problem,
Hmm.
Mhm.
and then hoping that you see owls and hawks around, because that
Yeah,
will
I've
fix
told
every
people
problem.
to put up raptor perches. So, like,
Yeah, yeah,
I know that there are like baits, right? There's some poisons, but a lot of the time when you're dealing with a little bit of a smaller grower, but sometimes the big ones as well, they already have, a cat population, or, they have dogs, and they don't want to risk putting out poison because,
yeah.
and, just thinking about those bigger predators. If you poison the food source, you poison those predators. So, but putting up raptor perches has been good um, advice. And I tell people, like, if you see a snake, you don't necessarily have to kill the snake. I mean, obviously, if it's poisonous, you probably don't want it. But I know in our area of Kentucky, like, we don't really have poisonous snakes. So, like, if you could just let it go, it will help with your population of rodents.
Yeah, they're probably there. They have to have a food source. So if they have a food source, that means you may have rodents in the area. So they're not always a bad thing.
Yeah, I
Right.
think that
They
the
start.
general, we can kind of maybe get this little part of the discussion out of the way early is like the rodenticides, the things the poisons that these things eat. They don't. It's not like they eat them and then die immediately right then and there.
and degrade and become nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a there. I think in general it is even more than some other pesticides, at least as far as I've seen in extension recommendations, is like a very very last solution,
Yes.
because of the bioaccumulation up through food chains. So
Mhm.
like
Mm.
something finds the rodent, eats the rodent that has the poison in it, and then maybe gets sick itself, then it gets eaten by something else, and so you're sort of, there's this butterfly effect of that rodenticide within the food chain to these really sensitive, like apex predators, like you're talking about, where they're at the very top where a lot of this stuff can accumulate up, and for
Mhm.
like a raptor or something, or an owl or something like that.
And this is along those same lines, Brett, that you're discussing. Is that the number one thing we always say is first of all, you identify what is causing your issue, whatever that issue may be, whatever kind of damage. Number one is identify positively what you're dealing with. Number two is find out the status of that. If you're looking for lethal options like something to dispatch that animal, whether it be a 12 gauge slug or whatever, the first thing you need to do before you take extreme measures, I know that it's upsetting to some people when you go out there and half of your garden is destroyed by deer overnight. But the first thing you do is identify what is causing you the problem. And the second thing is I usually encourage people to make a call to the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife,
Yeah.
specifically their field biologist. And we'll try to remember to put a link in the podcast for that. But they can discuss what your like lethal control options, if that's what you're interested in, or relocation options, which relocation is an interesting topic in
Mm-hmm.
itself, but that's what you need to do first. It's like what Brett's talking about. If you're involving yourself in some of those more lethal methods, you need to know the status, like vultures. Alexis, you brought that up,
Mhm.
and aren't they protected status? You have to get
The
permits.
black-headed vultures are a protected
Yeah,
status. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a good that's a good example of
Mhm.
an animal that you need to look into before you take any kind of control action on those. And there's other animals like that too. So before we get too deep into the discussion, know the animal and know what its protected class is, and do work with those fish and wildlife biologists. They're really really good, and I think there's one assigned to every county in the state of Kentucky. They cover multiple counties, but every
Mhm.
grouping of county has someone that you can call. So do that.
Mhm.
What else?
Yeah.
We've covered what we've. You talked a little bit about deer,
Mm-hmm.
moles, and voles, which those can be
So
frustrating. But we have lots of cats around.
to
Yeah,
circle
go
back real
ahead.
quick on the moles thing, Ray, is so you talked about voles having real strong implications for like orchards, for instance, or
Hmm.
for young trees. Are moles, not to downplay it, but are they moles mostly an aesthetic problem, or is there a
Yeah,
reason?
there is some commercial problems with moles being present. If you have a soccer field and you have moles in there, I mean, you don't want hospital bills racking up if you're a commercial entity or a school system.
Somebody
So there's
twisting their ankle or busting
That's it,
their,
and
yeah.
that is, I rolled down my hill the other day because I have moles all in the backyard. I have a lot of clover and stuff, and I was actually going down to my garden, and Reed, my son, my 10-year-old, ran out there and said, "You okay, Dad?" And I'm like, "I'm fine. My pride is
I
Let me just
broken."
Well,
lay here for
Do
a
you
minute.
all have any like outdoor cameras that might have caught
No, we have a
that
Ring camera, but I rolled past. It's a steep slope. I rode. Thank goodness, or Jennifer would have had that posted online
so
already.
just to paint the picture of what went through my mind when you just said that, Ray and I were at a Halloween party a couple years ago, and Ray was dressed up as Bilbo Baggins. Um,
Yes, I was.
like one of the best costumes I have ever seen. So I'm imagining you sort of walking down the hill barefoot in your Bilbo
I
Baggins
was
costume
barefooted. I
with a
was.
lit pipe, just sort of going along
I'm
with
going
maybe like
on
a
an adventure.
I
exactly, and
was.
just eating it, rolling down the hill.
I did. Well, let's just amp this up a little bit more. I was eating a nectarine from my tree, and it went flying, and I went flying. We have a nectarine tree, and that was one of the only good nectarines from that tree, and I was very upset.
The moles are off in the corner, like, we got him. We got him.
Got him. So that is one case scenario where you do have to worry about moles. It is mainly an aesthetic, I guess, to answer your question.
Yeah,
it's mainly aesthetic. Yeah.
The only time I can think of it as like a real crop problem is if you've got bulbs in an area and they're tunneling underneath the bulbs or underneath even the plant sets. They can create like a cavity, or they'll push the bulbs up out of the area. But usually it's not like a widespread problem, and normally it's something you can fix if you catch it ahead of time. So it's not as bad as like when you pick up a tulip bulb and it's half eaten because a vole has eaten it.
For those guys, for the moles, I've seen the like the spring-loaded spike things.
Harpoon traps.
Oh gosh, I didn't know they were called that.
Harpoon traps.
Call me Ishmael. Let's go.
Great white mole.
The great white mole.
Yes. And keep in mind, dear listeners, that in some states you have to get a permit before you even trap moles. So check the status in your state. There's like a trapping permit that you have to get online. Did I ever tell you
when Adam and I we don't have to cover this, but I think it's kind of funny. We were on like an NPR channel, and we were taking listener calls, and Adam is the Franklin County horticulture agent, and someone called in and said, I have this mole problem. What do we do? And Adam and I looked at each other and we were like, well, do you live in the city? Because if not, you can shoot them. And that did not go over well with that audience.
Scorched earth.
We got a lot of hate from that. And at the time, Twitter was
it was a not thing. Happy with us. It was a real thing. Yeah. You just went straight to the nuclear option. I mean,
all right. Yeah. Get your 38 in your hollow points and bang, bang.
Maybe this is a good time to just take a brief pause. And I'm as guilty of this as any of the rest of us here. We are not all about just murdering animals for no reason, right?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
There is an element of like destruction of stuff, or there can cause real problems with commercial plantings or things like that. I think there are some times where people can make a mountain out of a molehill, if I may.
Nice. Very nice.
And it's important to kind of know that and have some perspective on that, especially like in our case where we're planting all of this crazy, all like dense amounts of biomass are in our backyard right now. All kinds of flowers and big leaves and perennials,
sugar things. Yeah.
I mean, we're asking for having a bunch of chipmunks and having a bunch of voles and having a bunch of other things. And for us, the benefits of that outweigh the downsides for the most part. And so like, it's just, there are ways of dealing with stuff. And I think for me, one of the take homes is like, don't just put out poison. It's right. And obviously there's other methods of exclusion and other things we can talk about with the other stuff too. But,
and I know a lot of people really like relocation. And I think that's where the importance of talking to that fish and wildlife biologist, or, you can contact, we have wildlife biologists at UK as well that are in extension, but contacting them, because often it's a death sentence to relocate animals, right? And so you're leaving them, and maybe you'll end up with a bunch of baby possums that are in a bucket in your barn because mom didn't come back to take care of it because it was relocated or something. So some animals relocate better than others, and so you really just can cause a lot of problems to an ecosystem by bringing 10 raccoons and letting them loose in the park. Right. So
it's good to work with your wildlife biologist on that for sure. That's a great point. Yeah.
Well, in my experience, like I've long kind of conceptualized it as like, if you remove individuals from, problematic individuals, let's say, who are harassing your garden, there's still an ecological niche there, right? That it's just inviting somebody else to take its place. And depending on it, it can be pretty rapid. And then, what are you doing? Are you getting to garden, or are you in the trapping business? Where are you spending your time?
I worked some with one of my internships was with a wildlife biologist, and he said something that stuck with me for many years. And he said the first concept with controlling nuisance wildlife, either commercially or in your backyard, he said, is do it early before they get a taste of the good stuff. He said, if he said, if it's one concept, one takeaway concept, whatever you're going to do, if it's fencing or it's some kind of topical
Preventative.
application, it's to do it. He said, because if you get an animal that's motivated by the
Yeah.
taste of your beautiful sweet corn and it knows what that sweet corn tastes like, he said no amount of fencing is going to keep that. It's going to try to jump an 8-foot fence, or it's going to try to go through the electric fence webbing that you put up. So
Right.
that stuck with me. He said if it's one thing you do, he said, is train animals early before they get a taste of whatever they're wanting to get into. And I found that to be true over my years in extension, is that I've taken, scenarios that have been pretty much very similar, where there's a crop that the animal wants to get into, and one crop has had the fence up early and they've put peanut butter on the pie pans and the deer comes up and licks it and gets a nice little zap. I bet that was interesting before the
Right.
crop is actually ripe, whatever that crop was. But the animal associates that area with a negative incentive, a negative experience. And then
Right.
there's other scenarios where they would do that exact same process, but deer's already been into an area and been scarfing down strawberries or whatever it is that the deer was eating, the sweet corn, but they would run through the fence, literally run through it at that point. The only difference is you've conditioned them early in one scenario and not the other. So
Sometimes that peaches and cream sweet corn tastes better than that
it's,
electric fence hurts.
I might go through the
Speaking of
fence
experience here.
myself. Yeah, oh yeah. You went straight on through it, haven't you, Brett? You went straight on through it.
Crashed on through it, wrapped myself up in a blanket.
I'm
and-
imagining like a Kool-Aid man just running
yeah.
through the wall.
Oh yeah.
Rolling through.
One method that I have learned about recently, I don't know if any of you all have ever used it, that seems a lot more simple, because I know some people have, children, or, electric fence, which can be really, really successful, isn't always the best way to go, or it's really expensive to get one that, runs on solar, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But somebody told me about, and it still takes some effort, but is just clear fishing line. And so putting it up early, and even for deer, it doesn't have to be, high. We always think deer, we need a 12-foot fence, but sometimes, again, if you get it early, you can put it at that chest height, or like another one down
They
low
bump
at their
into it
legs.
and they're like, what is
And
this?
you don't mark it or anything, which is
Yeah.
the opposite of what I would think. You don't want them to know it's there, because when they hit it, it freaks them out because they can't see anything. And so then they're not, and like the same thing for rabbits, you have to put it at a level where they're going to hit it. But a lot of the time, the fact that they can't see it is what freaks them out the most. And I just thought that's a really inexpensive, relatively easy way to try,
We
doing stuff like that.
my father did that, and he would have like two lines of that ran 3 foot apart, one on the inside. So if they got scared and went forward, usually they don't. Deer don't.
Yeah.
They get scared and they back up. But if the first one didn't get them, the second would, I guess, finish them off, their mental state off, and then they would leave the area.
I can't take it anymore.
Yeah, but now birds were a little bit different. When he would have
Well, that's
trouble
true.
with like crows going down the row, picking out young corn seedlings, he would, tie pie pans on there, reflective tape, or even like little wind chime things that would move and may
reflect
have
light,
motion.
like CDs was like a thing when I was
CDs
doing
that
that.
work
Yeah.
great, yeah.
Oh, 07,
But,
because it was like, I don't need CDs anymore. I've got
No.
50 of them.
Hey, I bet you wish you had that Nirvana one back though, didn't you? Yeah, for sure. But anything that makes movement like that, I guess things like crows, they're so smart, they will eventually,
Yeah,
from
it's like trying to
experience,
keep a person
get
out.
used to it.
Right.
Yeah. And even if you're using a scarecrow, you have to move it pretty often. So that's some habitat modifications you can do. Like the Alexis was talking more like fencing, but there's some other things you can do. I was trying to think, like commercially,
The
we
water
use like
thing
propane.
that senses
Oh,
movement.
yeah.
That
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorites, especially for cats and dogs, because they can be a nuisance wildlife. Kind of digging in my garden, we have every neighborhood cat down there, and it's a giant litter box, and I'm not happy. But it's amazing
Yeah.
what those sprinkler, and they make those, don't they, Alexis, that are designed just for wildlife control.
Yeah.
They're purpose built for
puts a
that,
jet.
and Yeah, and it just jets. And I guess rabbits don't like getting shot in the face with a high velocity stream of water. And I love to watch them when they just run away. Yeah,
I know
those.
it's hard to like imagine like because when I think of dogs and that like wild dogs, it'd be like,
Yeah, they just.
all right.
Yeah,
Let's
they're down
do
there
it.
chilling in it. Yeah. So yeah, those are great. That's actually one of my favorites, and it makes a noise, a little bit of a noise with the water stream coming through there. Um, but that's a great option. I like that one a lot, and it works particularly well with cats. Cats just do not like the water, and I really like it for that. Yeah, that's a
Maybe
good one.
maybe this is a good chance to just give a shout out to a little resource bank within the UK extensions. It's in the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources, tends to be the ones who put out a lot of the stuff related to wildlife management in different contexts. And so I kind of became more aware of that because there's implications for wildlife getting in as far as food safety stuff for
The
the Food
gap
Safety
audits, yeah.
Modernization Act, as well as the Good Agricultural Practices programs. And so there we could put a link to that, but there's all kinds of stuff about dealing with damage from and problems from vultures and squirrels and beavers even.
Muskrats.
I
Brief
forget.
side note
Uh-oh.
before we move on, and I can't remember who told me about this originally. It might have been my brother Logan. If not, we'll just give him credit.
Shout out Logan, anyways.
There was a program back in the 40s wherein they
Ray's heyday.
relocated. Yeah, Ray, you might have been involved in this. You might have been flying one of the planes.
It's very possible. It's very possible.
That trapped beavers were relocated to Idaho, I believe, and they were dropped out of a plane with parachutes, and upon landing, the box sprung open. The survival rate for the beavers was actually higher than other forms of relocation. It generally was more cost effective than other forms of relocation. There is actually a Wikipedia article, I'm going to look it up right now, for the beaver drop.
The Great Idaho Beaver Drop,
1948. 1948. An Idaho Department of Fish and Game program to relocate beavers from northwestern Idaho to the Chamberlain Basin in central Idaho. The program involved moving 76 beavers.
Yes.
1776, 76, American program, love it.
America.
And parachuting them down to the ground.
It's like the Beaver Squadron. I mean, it's amazing.
Started
The
to address
picture.
complaints about property damage. Parachuting beavers proved to be more cost effective and also decreased beaver mortality rates compared with alternative methods for relocation. So if you're interested, there's a little picture of the beaver in the box as it landed.
Short, sweet, to the point.
What are they comparing the mortality rate to? Like parachutes versus no parachutes? I mean,
I know, right?
Oh, we didn't know beavers couldn't fly.
Yeah, science was big back then, so you had to have a control group.
we were
Yeah.
successful.
Each individual beaver had its own little box. Oh my lord!
Yeah,
That
and they
is-
probably
that's not what I
grabbed
pictured.
they grabbed the box and then went and built a dam with it. I'm like, yeah, they shipped me in some supplies.
Got
Heck
this.
I like it.
And that is the story of why Idaho is so arid.
Yeah. But beavers can cause lots of problems with like
Yeah.
flooding and other
Yeah.
issues of all kinds of things. And
Cut
we don't
down
have
all
it
your
a ton.
trees.
In in my neck of the woods, we don't have it a ton, but there's other places where it's a really huge deal.
Where I was when I was in Harlan County, like the northern slope of Pine Mountain, that was probably the most wildlife pressure that I saw impacting systems. I mean, the deer situation was like, forget it. You could be outside with a machine gun and it doesn't matter. Like, they're just going to keep coming.
They're like, what are you going to do about it?
But we also had a beaver pond that would, periodically they'd really get after it and flood like a whole area, which, we didn't grow in there, but they historically had. So you could see how it would impact, an old potato field. And they also had something there that I hadn't experienced before. There was some damage to a high tunnel when I first got there. And I was like, hey, what's that from? And they're like, oh, a black bear came rolling through and just took a swipe at this. And I was like, cool. I didn't learn in school how to come up with a bear exclusion practice.
We had to deal with that with bees. They were after the larvae in Floyd County, and there's a lot of hives destroyed, and we had to there's a system where you can run electric and do the
Yeah.
negative incentive with dry boxes and condition them. But yeah, it's a big issue there with
Mm,
things like bears that maybe we don't so much think about here in the central part of the state, but we're getting bears here
yeah.
too. And I know many of you guys that are listening in
Mhm.
other parts of the country may be accustomed to this, but I don't think about that a lot. But I've had to
Hmm.
deal with that, and things like elk when I was in the eastern part of the state, they would just pull up a 4-inch caliper tree that weighs 300 pounds and be chewing on the bark just with it sticking
Right.
out of their mouth because they're large animals. When you get into special cases like that with like bears and elk and that are under protected status, that's really important to then we worked a lot in the east like you're saying, Josh, where the pressure was really high. It seems like that we worked a lot more there in those areas with the field biologist.
Yeah.
If there's a
There was.
relocation effort or whatever we needed.
Yeah. We did have, there was a guy in the community who did bees for honey, and he had a whole, like, might as well have been ADX Florence or something like that system of like scare, like electrification. Like, as a
Yeah.
Yeah.
human, I didn't want to get near his hive boxes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Hard
serious.
pass. So we haven't really talked about I know I get a lot of calls and people asking questions about like what to actually do about things like rabbits. I mean, we've mentioned like there's like the water thing, but let's
Yeah.
just say that someone has limited water access. Maybe they're using a pump and so they can't
Mhm.
just like leave the city water on with a, with a sensor. But they can either get something solar or, like more of a just a physical barrier. What have you all seen that has been, successful for something small like rabbits? I feel like that's pretty universal.
Fencing's always like the best. Obviously, it's the premium option, but it's always the best option. That was rule number 2 from the wildlife biologist I worked with. Was
Yeah.
one is get them conditioned early. Number 2 was fencing is always the best option, but it's the one that I think people
Most
do the least when it
expensive.
comes to
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
deer because it's a 6 to 8 foot recommendation. But with rabbits, you can build a much lower fence as long as that fence is attached very firmly to the ground. So fencing for rabbits is much lower.
Yeah.
It's not like a deer fence. It has to be around 8 foot tall to be truly effective in those high pressure areas like Josh is talking about. So fencing is by far the best option in a lot of these scenarios. But don't the some of the taste repellents, which we've not really talked about, the mint and the capsaicin and the
Mhm.
putrid egg solids. There's
Mm.
lots of taste repellents that you can
Right.
use, and some of those have rabbit labels on there.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I don't see a lot of research in that area as far as to their true effectiveness.
Mhm.
So your use case may vary. So there's fencing
Yeah.
options
Mhm.
that works great for rabbits, and then there's some of the taste repellents, I think.
When I was farming in Georgia, we kind of went through this like iterative process of like starting out with those quicker solutions,
Mhm.
like the chemical repellents, we'll call them.
Yeah.
Yeah, Thyrum
Um,
and then all the others.
and then there was another point where we got these, like, they were solar powered little attachments that you hung at sort of like predator eye level, and they would make like a red light flash. I mean, we kind of moved up all these different interventions,
Yeah,
and it's like I think we had talked about before, where it's like you start out with something, and yeah, it's like effective for the first couple of days, and
yeah,
then they figure it out, and then you do the next thing.
Mhm.
And the other thing is some of those. Like the liquid, well, the one that's like whole egg solids. I don't want to say a
Mhm.
yeah.
brand name, but
The
like
one that smells
that can
really bad.
also like attract others. Like, it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
that might keep away rabbits, but like a raccoon's gonna be like, ooh, what's
I
going on
Who's
think
over here? And
rotting over
now,
here?
some of the
right?
blood repellents for rabbits, like that they use down south, the blood repellents will repel the rabbits, but they will attract actually other predators. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Coyotes. Yeah.
um,
And so we went through this whole season of like consistently trying these more like intensive interventions until we got to
mm,
the fence with an electric line. Now we had
yeah,
the infrastructure for that because we were also doing animals, so it's just like, forget it. Like, we're building a little fence.
yeah,
And
Yeah.
so after having a really like lame summer of continually trying things and having to outsmart it, it's just like I jump to the option, right? Like, if you can do
Yeah.
the fence or some kind of exclusion, like, we talked about, keeping ground cover as low as possible.
yeah.
So
That's like
there's
more like a
no place
habitat
to hide,
modification.
Mhm.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. It's like,
yeah.
and making that boundary so they have to cross it to get to your
Hmm.
garden.
And
Those
that's
are,
a
I think,
great
the gold
point.
standard.
Yeah, and you guys have all alluded to it, but usually with wildlife control, from what I've seen, if you have a lot of pressure, it's a combination of exclusion, habitat modification, repellents. It's
Hmm.
all of those things, especially in a commercial scenario where you may be getting audited. And wildlife, has a lot of implications for commercial operations and food safety. In those cases, you're probably using more than one method. You're probably using, fences along with other things like the habitat modification, LOMO, and all that stuff, and allowing the predators in. But it's usually not one answer. I guess a case in point is my backyard garden. I moved the garden intentionally. I knew what I was doing when I did it, but I moved it from up close to the house in raised beds because it was too easy and was too
Hmm.
productive. So I wanted to move it over the hill in ground because that's a lot of work, and I could possibly
Hmm.
roll down the hill and hurt myself, and I enjoy all of that. But I also moved it closer to the creek where there's habitat for
Oh
lots and
yeah,
lots of rabbits.
the
And not only
wildlife
did I
interstate.
yeah, and not only did I do that, but I thought we had a podcast that motivated me to do clover in my backyard, which rabbits love. So it's like a
Mm.
Beatrix Potter film in my backyard. It's like Benjamin Bunny is having a rave
Little
down
watershed
there.
down action.
Yes, exactly, Josh. But that's what's going on. But I kind of let them have their share. I did all of that knowing that I have a fence down there that I have a couple holes under, and I watch the rabbits come in and out. They've wore it out. Rabbits come in and out of that. I'm like, fine. And my wife likes to watch the rabbits. And if she sees me down there doing something to harass the rabbits, I will get harassed. So I give, and I guess it was you, Brett, that said, you have to assess the damage. You have to kind of
Mhm.
put it into perspective, and it's my home garden. It's not like a commercial operation, so I can accept a certain amount of damage. It's no big deal to me. So the rabbits get their share. We have flowers down there in a small garden plot, and they eat certain things. They eat my cover crop down to the ground, but they get their share. And I did all of that knowing that I would have more pressure down there, but I wanted to have a garden down there. It's pretty. I watch the rabbits. I watch the garden grow. It's
Mhm.
what I do, but I guess I did all that knowing that I was going to accept a certain amount of damage. So that's that perspective I think you were talking about, Brett, as far as, and obviously your decision matrix is going to be different if you're a commercial producer, like you were talking about, Josh, that's a large operation and you're just getting tons of pressure and damage, and that gets into your livelihood. And that's a different set of decision making tools there.
Hmm.
But it's interesting when you talk about wildlife damage, you have to kind of, as you're working with people, ask all of these questions. You have to, you know, ask a lot of questions to get to the point of getting some kind of plan together, whether it's a
Yeah.
homeowner or a commercial
I've
operation.
always wondered if, so like, your livestock guardian dogs, right? Can you have
Mhm.
a vegetable crop guardian dog, or are they really into more like, we need a heartbeat in
I don't know
order
if
for
they
us?
bond to tomatoes quite the same. Yeah, I don't know that they bond to a
I
tomato.
didn't know if they
Right.
were would just kind of patrol the outskirts
I feel like
of.
we have cats,
Ooh.
we have neighborhood cats that act in that role. It's like, yeah, the
We
the
have
Warrior series
vegetable
about cat warrior
guardian
cats. It's kind of
cats.
like that. Yes, guardian cats.
They do that like where I was in Japan. They do that. They have like gardens, but they also have like kind of at the they have these spots where essentially they have a movable dog house, and
Mm,
then there's a dog on like a lunge line that allows
hmm.
them to go to the extent of sort of the garden,
Hmm.
or they are placed in kind of relation to prevent like
Yeah,
rabbits coming from the trees
yeah.
or whatever, right?
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
like every garden that we or every vegetable production system that we went to, there's like a dog with the doghouse, and
Yeah.
it's like hanging out.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
We did something. We extended our fence so our dog could patrol, but now she's made friends with the rabbits. It's just dumb. But we've got like a little house
Oh,
dog. It's not the
Dinah.
kind of utility dogs that Josh is talking about. But we did extend our fence down beyond the garden and that's one of the reasons. But we have a lot of neighborhood cats, which can be highly destructive on
Hmm.
like native birds and rabbit populations and stuff like that. But our dog does go down there. She likes to hang out down there where it's shady by the garden,
Hmm.
and that does deter rabbits at certain times of the day. She doesn't stay out overnight, but yeah, that's a good point with the
In
animals.
in
Yeah,
commercial contexts, there are some food safety implications for having
Hmm.
Sure.
dogs and
Yeah.
cats and other animals
Yes.
intermingled, and so it's just
Yep.
something to be aware of.
Commercially, it's once again a completely different set of questions you're going to be asked on your food safety audit, or if you're just doing a
Mhm.
self audit. Yeah, that'll be a section on there, domestic and wildlife, both both mammals. So
I was
absolutely.
thinking, can I have a tulip guardian dog, or because deer love tulips, so I just tulip guardian dog. I feel like is worth its
I
weight,
feel like
but
I
that's what
mean,
the corgi was developed for.
Yes,
specifically, we don't
for its
actually need it
combat
to herd
skills.
anything. It's more, combat skills.
you
Which
could be I mean, if it doesn't work out functionally, there's definitely an Instagram niche for a tulip guardian dog where you can make it
Oh, I
look like
think
it
so.
works
Hmm.
and
I mean, that's
I
all
think
that
so.
culture.
matters. I can fake it till I make it.
You
That's
can make
right.
that work. I think
Coming soon.
planting if you have a garden and you're having trouble with things like deer and rabbits, they certainly don't like to eat marigolds. I don't know of anything that likes to eat marigolds, and there's just certain plants, and you can look that up based on your zip code, deer resistant plants.
Mm.
Mm.
And that's it. I mean, like lavender, no deer in its right mind is going to eat lavender.
So you're
But
saying
there's
like
just
plant things that they don't want to eat as a strategy
yes.
for success if nothing else works.
If nothing else works, and you're trying to save face, then maybe plant those plants that they don't find palatable. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and
I just
that's
meant
another
I was like,
strategy.
oh, well, the marigold like keep a deer away, and as it walks around and then eats everything
Oh,
else.
oh,
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
gonna keep it from it. It's that you're substituting that for maybe plants that are more susceptible. But I wish that it would provide a magical barrier. But unfortunately, I don't think they do.
What about the scent barriers? So like the
Yeah, the
coyote
mints.
pee and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah, you can
I'm
get
not
some of
gonna
those.
lie. I have a friend who has three young boys, and she's was complaining about how she can never keep the deer out of her garden. And I said, "Well, it's just your home garden. You got three boys who like to go pee outside. Just tell them where they can and can't go." And
Yeah, they eat
because
a
like
lot of protein, so it's gonna be like predator smelling.
It's
Yeah.
very
And there is the commercial protein stuff. Yeah, Josh, I've seen that, the protein repellents that is just smells like animal protein. So yeah, there you go, Alexis. Yeah,
so.
and that I guess that goes along the same thing. I used to there's a big craze many years ago, and I still see it every now and again. And it seems kind of morbid to me when I really think about it and I verbalize it now. But it's the bags of hair hung in pantyhose to get
Mm.
the human smell. I've heard that. I know that it works for some people, other people it doesn't, and that's one of
I
the
know if
points
I
of
was
the
trying to break
discussion
into a
today.
garden and I saw lots of bags of
Bags of
hair,
hair.
I'd be like, I don't like what's happening
I'm
here.
gonna pass.
I
Yeah.
can't tell if these are trophies that are telling me that,
Abandoned hope,
I'm
all ye
next.
who enter.
I might be on a true crime podcast next, but
Yeah.
not in the way
Yeah.
you think.
Trying to get that smell in the area, I guess, whether it be pee or hair. I
Yeah,
mean,
I've heard of people who like contact their local barber and get like
yeah,
all
Mm.
the
yeah.
waste hair and they sprinkle it around the edge of the garden, which is fine until it rains, and then really the smell kind of
Yeah.
dissipates after the
Well, and
rain.
it's
But
also free lice.
Yeah.
yeah.
there's that.
I don't know
It
the
was in
effectiveness
the
of
movie
a
the
lot of these methods.
in
Yeah.
that was in the movie The Rookie with Dennis Quaid. Do you guys
Yeah,
remember that movie?
yeah.
Where he's like
I
an
do.
old guy who like has a renaissance of his career somehow or something.
Uh huh.
There was part where they were trying to get grass to grow in
Yeah.
the outfield or something, and they put the hair around it, and
Mhm.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
If
just
Dennis
cite your
Quaid
source
does it,
of The Rookie.
There you go. If it's in the rookie, it's good enough for me.
obviously, if it's in a movie, it's got to be true. So,
All of these things we're talking about today, some of these things we kind of laugh about. They're anecdotal, and some of the things that obviously a fence is going to do a pretty good job if you erect a big barrier. I mean, it worked for medieval castles. It's going to work for your garden or commercial operation. It's an expensive option, but the third point, the wildlife biologist stressed to me, he said your mileage is going to vary if you use the same tactic in different situations. It depends on the motivation of the animal. And he said, believe it or not, I guess, and he was familiar with some studies that I have never looked up, but some animals just have more of a tolerance for the taste repellents, or for
uh-huh.
the spicy repellents and the putrid egg solid repellents. So it depends on how hungry the animal is. And Alexis,
Mhm.
you mentioned that on your farm there is a alfalfa field
Mhm.
that is close by, which is probably the best munching a deer's ever going to do. is in an alfalfa field. So what are they just kind of? I'm guessing they just cross your place to get there
I
to
hope
the
so.
more.
I mean, so
Yeah,
far
I
yeah.
mean, her
they've
place is like maybe a dessert. Like once they
It's like
get
a
their fill.
it's like a road stop. Yeah, it's
they
just like
must
a
be
rest
pretty
stop.
lazy because they don't seem to. Although I have found some damage, but I'm not certain it is a deer. Even though we've seen deer tracks, it feels more like a rabbit to me of just nipping off the tops of some of my
Is it like
perennials.
everything low? It look like
Well,
you can tell.
they're
Yeah.
flocks, so they're only about
Okay, they're low.
3 foot
Yeah.
high and or 2 foot high anyway. So, but it's I don't know. It's just a little sketchy in there. I mean, it
Rabbits
even could
will
be an insect, but
they'll munch a lot.
um I think the way it is, it's at the very end of a row too. So,
Yeah.
anyways, but
Yeah.
um, okay, well, yeah, wildlife management. Basically, what I usually tell people is there's probably not just one answer, and you're going to have to try a couple different things to see what the tolerance of your specific raccoon problem might be, or vole, or whatever that is. Because what we can give you the best option, a lot of those times those best options, the ones that we say will work 100% of the time. For example, if you hit a mole with a harpoon trap, um, it will take care of your mole problem. But a lot of time people don't want to do that, or they, maybe they can't put out poison baits if that's kind of the method they want to do because of dogs or other animals, just or personal reasons. So there's not always that. But like what I have done, I've used the capsaicin for voles, and it worked great for me. But that doesn't mean it will number one work again if I need to put it
Yeah.
down, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it'll work for my neighbor or someone else
Mm-hmm.
around the state. So
Their moles might be Cajun, they might be
right,
into
like
Could
it.
be. They
you
may
don't
love
know,
that
they're
spice.
like a little spicy. So you you just kind of have to try some different things. But if you wanted the one thing that definitely will work, as long as you build it correctly for the pest problem that you have to identify first, is an exclusion by a fence or
Mm-hmm.
something. So if you don't want to go through that problem of like, let's try this and then let's try this, then go ahead and invest in that. And then at least you have it. So usually those
Mhm.
fences are something you can put up every year,
Yeah.
and it's kind of a one-time investment for the most part.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the two main things I usually recommend. If it's a valuable crop, is exclusion and habitat modification. I start with the two upper tiers, and
Mm-hmm.
if it's a homeowner, we talk a lot about the repellents and things like that. So you can add those in if you're a homeowner, where maybe it's a little bit more low key scenario. And once again, don't forget that we have here in Kentucky and probably in your state where you're listening from. We do have a wildlife biologist that can take a phone call and work a lot more in depth on some of these situations. Once again, they can give you the legal status of the
Mm-hmm.
critter and help you identify the critter that's causing you problems. So,
Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all for being here and for giving us the suggestion, and for reaching out. So it is proof that we do read your emails and see your messages. So if you have any ideas for future episodes, we're always interested in that. This message reminded us we hadn't done an episode on this. So, but if you'd like something maybe more specific about wildlife, or maybe we can bring on our wildlife specialist that we have at UK, who's a cool guy. He can tell you some real funny stories about trapping beavers, of all things. But he knows a lot. Very, very great. We'll put links to those websites down below where you can do some more reading, try to help you identify maybe what's causing some problems in there. And you can always reach out with photos to your local county extension office, and we can help you with that. But that is today's episode, and we hope that as we grow this podcast, you will grow with us. Have a great one.